Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. Today we are talking about your Week 2 waiver wire pickups. Guys, you need to look for to see if they're available. You need to get them on your team. So we're going to go over the names right now, and here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And hey, before I begin, if you could please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, share this with your friends, and of course, subscribe. All those things really help me with the YouTube algorithm and increasing the exposure of this podcast, and I do very much appreciate it. So, what a week, man. Hey, yeah, week 1 in the books. What a great weekend of football. It was super fantastic. It was just so exciting seeing people in the stands again, and man, some surprising results. Who would have thought that Green Bay would have face planted like it did on Sunday? That was, to me, that was the most shocking thing that happened. And but it was good because it's going to lead me to a victory in one of my fantasy leagues because I was playing a guy that had Aaron Rodgers and Robert Tonyan on his team. So it was good for me. So I'm happy in their misery. But anyway, we got to talk about the waiver wire because one of my philosophy with fantasy football is you never stop improving your team. You always check the waiver wire multiple times per week. You know, you're going to check it. You're going to check it today for these players to get them added onto your team. But then after the waivers clear on Wednesday, you're going to want to check it again because you're going to want to see who people dropped. And it's there are often surprising names that will end up there. As an example, in one of my leagues, which is one of my high stakes fantasy leagues, someone dropped Michael Gallup after the Thursday game and dropped him onto the waiver wires. I know he's going to miss a few weeks, but this is a league with a 10-team bench, and I don't know, I would have just kept him on my bench for those extra couple of weeks. I got enough room on there, but apparently this guy didn't want to, so it's fine. So someone else can get him and pick him up and utilize him once he comes back to the team, which will be probably before the end of the month. So I don't know what he was thinking with that, but let's get right to it. So now, one more thing I want to say. When it comes to the waiver wire, when you're looking at the players that are available on your waiver wire, do not sort that list by points scored, okay? Because that's a very misleading stat because some dude could get like maybe 3 targets and he gets 1 catch, but it's for a touchdown, and so he's going to look really good for points even though he got 1 catch and only 3 targets. You don't want to bother with that. What I do is I sort the players available by their targets and then by their carries to see who was getting the most volume over the course of the prior week. That's how I create these lists. And so let's just get right to it. But that's really what you need to look at. You need to look at the volume. How much usage are they getting on that offense? Because that's going to portend towards future fantasy production. That's what you want. You don't want the guy that got lucky with the touchdown. I don't want that guy. I would much rather get a guy that got 8 targets and no touchdowns versus a guy that got 2 targets and 1 touchdown. That's just straight up. It's going to be much better for my team to have that first player on there. So let's get right to it. So let's talk about quarterbacks first. And the first quarterback I want to talk about, boy, I got to tell you, very surprising. He played against one of the best defenses in the league, and he did very respectable. I'm talking about Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. Who would have predicted this? I mean, for me, I was thinking that the Detroit-San Francisco game was the game that was going to be the shutout this week. But no, Detroit scored 33 points. That's pretty good. And Goff was spreading the ball all around. He was heavily utilizing his running backs and his tight end, which was great to see. But he got 338 yards and 3 touchdowns, only 1 interception, and he also rushed for 18 yards and got a rushing TD. So he was the number 3 scoring quarterback on the week. How crazy is that? That just blows my mind. But I got to say, man, I would not trust Jared Goff as my QB1. There's no way I'm going to be doing that. But I would absolutely put him on my bench as my backup quarterback in those leagues where you got a deeper bench. I think he would be a great choice to put in there. And this certainly was a very promising start. Maybe a little bit of breath of fresh air for him too, to get out of the Rams organization where he'd been vilified for so long. But next up, he gets the Green Bay defense. What did the Green Bay defense do? Well, they allowed Jameis Winston to score 5 touchdowns. So I think that's pretty good. Let's keep running with it. Next up is the guy that scored those 5 touchdowns, Jameis Winston, who's only 43% rostered in leagues, and kind of an unusual scoring line, given that he only had 148 passing yards, yet he got 5 touchdowns off of them. I don't know how that works, but that's what happened. But he also got 0 interceptions, which is amazing. Jameis Winston, you just expect him to get interceptions. But he played very well. He also added 6 rushes for 37 yards, so that's some nice additional points with the rushing usage. And he was the number 4 scoring quarterback of this week. Now, unlike Jared Goff, I would be willing to trust Jameis as my QB1. If you really didn't have a better choice. But I would absolutely get him on as my quarterback too. If you've got a bench that's deep enough to hold a second quarterback, I would do it. He's got Carolina next week, and so this should be a good game. And like I said, very promising starts for both these guys, even if it was a little bit unusual for Winston. So let's move on to the running backs. And the first running back I want to talk about, just shocking. It's going to be impossible to read this backfield during the course of this season, but this might be a guy you might want to pick up to add some depth to your running back core, given that he got 26 carries this past week. It was Mark Ingram of the Houston Texans. Really? I mean, it was nice to see that all 3 of the running backs there did get pretty substantial usage. Mark Ingram's usage, though, kind of reminds me of like a Frank Gore kind of situation. He only averaged 3.4 yards per carry. He got a total of 85 yards off those 26 carries, no touchdowns. And so, again, I don't like him in PPR, but if you're in a standard points league, that's a great line for someone that you could put into your flex. And so I would absolutely pick him up in a standard points league, for sure. They have Cleveland. They are at Cleveland for their next game. So we'll see how that goes. I'm still trying to get a read on the Cleveland defense. It's hard to get a read on them when they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs, though. So next up, here's another backfield, which is impossible, but certainly this guy's worth a pickup because he just showed how effective he could be. It's Eli Mitchell of the San Francisco 49ers, who literally came out of nowhere. Dude's only 7% rostered right now. And I think most of his success came from the fact that Trey Sermon was a healthy scratch, was not playing. That was announced right before the game started. And then Raheem Mostert also got injured early, big surprise. And so he was like the primary back. And what did he do with that? Well, he turned 19 carries into 194 yards and a touchdown. Amazing. And they were talking about him on the morning fantasy shows. And so I picked him up in a couple of my leagues, but I didn't start him because I didn't know what to trust about that usage. And really, again, not only is it, Sermon, I expect Sermon to be healthy next week, and Mostert will probably be back. You've also got Jermichael Hasty in this backfield. It's very, very crowded. I think on a week-to-week basis, it's going to be impossible to know who the primary back is going to be for, targets and touches. But I think Eli Mitchell is absolutely worth a bench slot. Absolutely. Because injuries happen, as they did this past weekend. And, that can thrust people in this backfield into startable fantasy roles. And so I would absolutely put a bid in on him. The third running back I want to talk about is only 23% rostered, but certainly his role became much more clear and much more defined when they cut Latavius Murray. So I am talking about Tony Jones of the New Orleans Saints, who is a great complementary back to Alvin Kamara. and he ended with 11 carries for 50 yards and then 1 catch for 3 yards and 1 target. So we're talking 12 touches and targets during the course of the game, which is a little low, but obviously anything happens to Kamara, he would have a much more substantial role. And even with Kamara healthy, he's still going to have a role in this offense. So I think he is absolutely worth putting on your bench for right now. I wouldn't start him, but I think he's good enough to be on there, especially if you've got like a dead zone running back who didn't get any usage this past week. So, that's where you're at. Next person I want to talk about is wide receivers. And the first wide receiver I want to talk about is a guy who is surprisingly only 45% rostered. I had some real issues with this guy during the offseason. On my drafting app, you could see the value that he was offering, and he was getting a huge discount because of all of his nonsense. But I got to say, man, his role is secure and substantial, and you need to get him on your bench if you don't have it already. But Cole Beasley, who recorded an unbelievable 13 targets, caught 8 for 60 yards. That is amazing. In a PPR league, this guy is gold. I mean, get him on your team. 45% rostered right now. And clearly his role is substantial as a possession kind of guy, and he's going to get the volume. Maybe he won't get 13 targets every week, but he's going to get a substantial enough that I think he is flex worthy on any given week. I think you could flex him on any given week. So you definitely want to get him onto your team so you have that available as an option. Another guy I want to talk about who is literally came out of nowhere, is currently 0% rostered, is KJ Olstein, who is the wide receiver 3 in Minnesota. He got 9 targets on opening weekend and turned that into 7 catches for 76 yards. So again, another excellent PPR option if your league has PPR. He's going to have consistency issues just because of where he is on the pecking order, being behind Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. But I really want to see what this guy does over the next few weeks. So I want to get him on my roster so I can see. And if he continues to get around 7 to 9 targets a week, that means you can put him in your flex spot, and plus he'd be great for bye weeks, once the bye weeks start. The third guy I want to talk about is a guy that I hadn't really considered much, but clearly has a well-defined role on this offense. Now, part of this I think might be just because, Saquon Barkley is still coming back from his injury, and Kenny Golladay is dealing with the hamstring issue. But it's Sterling Shepard, who has a nice connection with Daniel Jones. Got 9 targets and turned him into 7 catches for 113 yards and a TD. Like I said, I think that was a little bit of an outsized result. I really want to see what happens over the next few weeks with him, but he's only 39% rostered in leagues. So Sterling Shepard is absolutely the kind of guy that you want to get on your bench to see what happens. Because if he continues to get, again, the 7 to 9 targets a week, that means he's startable. That means you can put him in your flex and you can play him. Let's see here. Next week, they do have a tough matchup, though. They have Washington at home. So just be careful of that. Be aware. I don't think I would start him next week against Washington. that defense is serious. Okay, so the next group of players I want to talk about are tight ends. And tight ends are always the biggest problem in your fantasy league. In fact, I got a 0 burger from Mike Gesicki this weekend, who got 3 lousy targets. Obviously very disappointing. I got to find myself someone else to put in there because, you've got Waddle coming back this week. So that means there's even going to be less targets available to go to the tight end. I don't want anything to do with that, but I've got a couple of great options. And another guy, 0% rostered, came out on week 1, got 8 targets for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was James O'Shaughnessy, their tight end. His target share, the amount of targets he got, the only tight ends who got more targets than him were Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson. That's it. So that is great volume. He turned it into 6 catches for 48 yards, which in any sort of PPR format is more than you could possibly hope for your average tight end. So I really like that. He does get Denver at home, so it's going to be a tough matchup. But I think that I think that Trevor Lawrence is going to use the tight end as a dump-off player in these tough situations. And so I think he's a great choice, not just to roster, but to start next week and see what he can do. I certainly hope he maintains this level of targets over the coming few weeks. We also have another guy who I had left for dead. I had no interest in drafting during the offseason. But Jared Cook of the Los Angeles Chargers came out and also got 8 targets. That made him third on the Chargers team for targets. He ended up with 5 catches for 56 yards. And I do expect this to continue to be a very high volume passing offense. And so he should continue to get a level of volume similar to that. He is a very reliable player, even though he is an older player, but he doesn't miss time, unlike Hunter Henry, who is gone now. But next week they got Dallas at home. That's a great matchup. Shoot, that's a great choice. If I had Jared Cook on my team, I would absolutely take him for next week and see what he can do. The final player I want to talk about, tight end, today is Kmet, and he is only 34% rostered, but he has clearly become the favorite tight end in Chicago. But we have a situation here where he is still splitting targets with Jimmy Graham, who is the other tight end on this team. So that makes him very risky in my eyes. But in week 1, he did end up with 7 targets, turned it into 5 catches for 42 yards. As far as I'm concerned, although he's a risky option, if you really need a tight end, I think he's a decent choice. If it's a PPR league, you can get some okay production out of the guy. And hopefully we'll see Justin Fields take over for this offense and clearly define who he's going to target. That's another big issue here, is we've got a potential quarterback murkiness happening between Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. So you got to be careful with that, but he is a good choice. Like I said, when I'm doing my waivers, I'm not just like trying to get James O'Shaughnessy. Okay, that's not how I'm going to run my waivers. I'm going to make a bid for James O'Shaughnessy and Jared Cook and Cole Kmet, all against the same player I'm going to drop. So as soon as I get one of them, it won't take any of the others. So if in this league where I've got Mike Gesicki, I'm going to try to trade Mike Gesicki or drop Mike Gesicki to pick up each one of these guys. I'm going to put each of them on my waiver wire. And so that way I have a very, very high chance to get at least one of them. And that's how I always run these things, is when if I'm looking to get a running back, you could try to get all 3 running backs. Your chances of getting all 3 are very slim because of the way the waivers run through. Is there's an order to the waivers, and the person with the first waiver priority gets his first choice, and then the second player with the second waiver priority gets his first choice, and it goes down like that. So instead of trying to get Mark Ingram and Eli Mitchell and Tony Jones by trading away 3 players off your bench, try to put them all against the same player on your bench, and that way you're most likely going to get at least one of them. Maybe it depends on your waiver priority. If your waiver priority is 12th, you're probably not going to get any of them. But that's always how I do it. When I'm running the waiver wire, I always place multiple bids against the same drop player. And that way, if I get one, then the other 2 won't fulfill because there's no player to drop. That player will have already been dropped, and it'll say you can't pick up that player because you already dropped them. So that's it. So that's week 2. So like I said, get out there, get back to it. I hope you had a good week 1. I had a pretty good week 1. I got to say, I was very happy. My one loss is on the guy that went and scored 100 points on me on Thursday night with Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper and Chris Godwin. And I knew that I had to have like a huge Sunday in order to be able to close the gap that he created by scoring that many points. And I couldn't do it. I had solid production from all my players, but not enough touchdowns. I needed them to get more touchdowns, and Chris Carson and Miles Sanders, no touchdowns for them. And, so it was a tough situation. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. And if you want to talk about these players or any other players that you think might be worthy to pick up the waiver wire, let me know. Leave a comment down below. I do appreciate it. So have yourself a great fantasy week, everybody. I will be back on Wednesday with my matchup show. So you want to stay tuned for that. And anyway, have yourself a great fantasy day, and I'll talk to you soon.